Hello everybody, this is Fluffy Foxy for the Creative Fox, and today you can witness me building my most ambitious build ever. At least it's the most detailed and it's the most realistic build I ever made, and as such you can see what I'm doing. Here I made my own window, and of course I forgot to record all of this, so you can only see the last steps, but I mainly made it out of wooden planks and some wooden beams and some gutter pieces. And here I'm setting up the inner windows because they should actually be modeled after windows that can actually be opened. And as we have glass pieces, I can actually do my own windows. And this is the first time trying. One thing I'm trying to get more practice in is how to use parts that aren't meant to be used in a way. For example, I used a cloud decoration to build the window handles and gutter pieces to build the window hinges. I tried to set up a framework around the windows, but the windows are too large for me to actually use the non-grid plaster pieces, so I actually used the balcony pieces here. I built a portion of the wall and then just copied it over and over and over again. I can tell you, with this kind of a detailed build, there were many problems that I noticed while building, which I will get into much further. Also, with such a big build, I had to split this up into two parts. I tried cutting out stuff that isn't that interesting, and still this build was so long that the first draft of the video of part 1 was more than 30 minutes. So I cut out a little bit more and then went about 28 minutes or something. So this is the video, the first part, which is mostly concerned about the exterior of the building, and the interior will follow in the next part. Although, yes, we are doing some interior in this part, mostly the structural stuff. Soon you will see that I tried to build a 2-story building, which could actually be accessed by the guests, and that was quite a hassle. In the end, this should be a nice 2-story restaurant, even if we don't have restaurants functionally in-game. Here I'm doing some trim work, which is standard trim work with wooden beams, and then I used the gilded roof, which is still a weird name because the gilded roof in my case isn't actually gilded because I painted it blue. I still don't understand the names of Planet Coaster sometimes. I tried raising it up so it will fit the main entrance I did, but then I had to put something between it to actually close up the walls, and I found a nice trim which you will see soon. First I tried to just use the wall trim of the resort balcony, and I did like the look, but I think my thought was that this should be a little bit more ornate. For those of you wondering, I intentionally broke completely with the design language of the rest of the park. Why? Because, as I told you in the last video, the story behind this build is actually that this restaurant at the lake was here before the park actually was opened, before the park actually existed. So the design language isn't the same as the parks, and you would see that when I continue the build. So the story is that this restaurant has been here before, and when the park was built they were actually happy to cooperate with park management because the park would offer them a nice opportunity for more paying guests, and as such the restaurant is much more well kept than the rest of the park, with more planters and more deliberate decorations and all of that. So it is still kept well styled and almost themed by the restaurant staff. The name of this restaurant is the Forellenhof, which means the trout pond or trout farm, because it was really well known for the trouts you could eat there that got fished out of the lake. Nowadays the lake isn't fished anymore, but still the restaurant is well known for their more high-class fish dishes. Here I'm using a trick that I learned from Tagi3D because he's the one breaking the game in really creative ways. I create a cutout using hexagons and then put them to each other, and then I can actually raise these pathways up one at a time and connect them with the editing tool, and then I can actually create a spiral staircase. It's a great trick in the advanced pathing tutorials by Tagi3D, and I love it. It was quite difficult to get it going, but once I got it going, it was a really great trick. But yes, if I wanted to make a second story actually accessible by guests, I needed to make something like that. And I wanted to have a kind of half-round staircase going through the building. And this would be completely superfluous if Planet Coaster 2 had the Planet Zoo restaurant system. I am still wondering why we don't already have that. It was in Planet Zoo and it's just completely missing in Planet Coaster. With the restaurant system, I could actually just make 2 stories and the people wouldn't have to walk up there, because when they go into the restaurant, they actually get teleported just up the stairs. And here the fiddling begins. Fiddle, 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 fiddle. Raise the stairs, fiddle again to see if the pathway is actually good. Fiddle some more, fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. This was such a hassle, and I asked myself why I wanted to do this. Perhaps I just like pain or something, because it was quite a hassle to build this. It was such a fiddly process that it took me hours and hours and hours, and I still wonder why I did that. But in the end, I think I wanted to prove to myself that it could be done. Here I'm just trying to fill out the bottom with as much path as possible without destroying the spiral staircase. And you see, there will still be some cutout left. I cannot just put this on an existing path, it would just break the path. And so it was editing the path to fit the dimensions of my building. But after a bit of fiddling, it actually worked. And I'm, to be honest, proud of that. That was quite a task which I managed to do. And in the end, I think it turned out well. But yes, the work took quite a long time. And you won't see much of it because I cut more than half of it just out, because I didn't think it would be making an interesting viewing experience. But just let me tell you, it took a long time. I had over 20 hours to cut down, so you can imagine how much time I used to make this 2-story building work. I left some of the fiddling in for you to just get an impression of how complicated that actually was and how much time I actually needed for it, because the path reacted in unforeseen ways and sometimes really weird, and it was sometimes a roll of a die if something worked that I wanted to work or if something didn't work. I'm still wondering about the question what I like better. Yes, I love the Planet Coaster Path tool, the Planet Coaster 2 Path tool, much more than the Planet Zoo Path tool, but sometimes the Planet Zoo Path tool reacted in much more predictable ways. And with the restaurants, for example, we didn't have to make a path that can actually go up to the 2nd story. On the other hand, in Planet Zoo, I could, as I always say, remove the curbs. I will do a ground cover in this restaurant later because I wanted to have a marble floor and a wooden floor on the 2nd story. So I have to raise the floor up so much so that the curbs aren't visible, because I cannot remove the curbs and I couldn't just fill everything with paths so the curbs are actually in the wall. So in February there will be the next update. Frontier, please keep in mind, let us remove the curbs. and perhaps give us the restaurants back, because we can actually need them. Well, on the other hand, then my build was needlessly complicated. Concerning needlessly complicated, I actually had a problem. With the size of my restaurant, the upper floor was too small, because I wanted to fit a bar in there and restrooms and of course a few tables. So I decided to enlarge the whole building on each side by 4 meters. That was quite a bit of work, but in the end I managed. But I cut all of this work out too, but it was quite a hassle. But finally I was able to build the walls on the upper floor with the wood foundation and more of my made wall pieces with my self-made windows, and after a while it started to look like a cool building. In the second part you can see the sightlines, and this building actually gave my park a beautiful sightline almost from the entrance to this building, and it's like a villa or a nice mansion that stands there. This is the ground cover I'm trying to make, but I had a big problem because making the stairs actually organically merge into the ground cover, but also covering the curbs was quite a hassle. I tried to do a little bit of a raised dais to make the stairs merge into it a little bit more naturally, but in the end it was okay. But you see, it's not the most beautiful, but I did my best with the means I had to actually achieve this. Also, I didn't want to build a custom rail, because with such a round build that would be actually quite hard, but I couldn't control the rails of the path good enough as well, so I tried to do my best here. I tried at first using marble as a ceiling and as a floor for the second floor, but that actually looked too monumental and too heavy, so I decided on a more light wooden floor for the second floor and a marble floor for the first floor. You just saw me checking the graphical settings, and while playing you will see that I'm having some problems with flickering lights. I don't know if you have these problems too. The graphics settings are set to the highest, but my graphics card isn't the best. I only have a GeForce RTX 3060, but the flickering actually sometimes just annoys me, and it doesn't look like the flickering comes from Z-fighting or something, because when I scroll nearer to something, the flickering actually stops completely. I don't know if it's an LOD issue or if it's a perspective issue, but the flickering sometimes annoys me quite heavily. I tried checking in the graphics settings if there's something I can change, but at the moment I can't get rid of it. I do some window boards, and yes, they will get decorated with small items. And in the second part you will see the complete decoration of the building, which didn't fit in the first part yet. The first part is the main construction and the deck I will be constructing soon, and the second part will be all the detailing on the interior and on the exterior. As I said, this restaurant is the most ambitious build I ever did, even though it may seem trivial for some of the more gifted builders. For me it was quite a milestone. Now I start to build the deck. The deck should actually be some kind of a wooden terrace, which is in front of the building and which in spring, summer and autumn months can be used to sit outside, overlooking the lake and enjoying the natural and, until the park came, peaceful atmosphere. I tried editing the landscape a bit, and I think it turned out well. When the restaurant was built, they actually built some kind of a rocky outcropping on the lake that wasn't there before and set the restaurant on it and placed a few natural rocks on it, which at present time was almost 30 or 40 years ago, so the rocks were actually overgrown with moss like the shoreline. You see me removing the water and putting the water back in, because to actually edit the terrain you have to remove the water, because around water editing terrain isn't possible. Here you see me using some rocks to create this rocky outcropping, and it should look natural, even though I'm not that great with rock work. Perhaps you have some tips how I can get better at rock work, because I think my rock work always looks a little bit unnatural and I'm not really satisfied with it. I painted the terrain to actually fit a bit better into the landscaping of the mossy rocks, and then I start building the wall around the pier-like terrace. I actually noticed that I still need so much more practice with this game. Here I try to turn around some of the wall pieces to have a less patterned look, less repetition in the pattern of the wall, and then build the wall. But yes, I need more practice with the game. Especially when building the deck, I did many building steps before I did some other building steps that I could have done before to actually have things copied and pasted. So, for example, I built all the tables. Then I got into my mind to have some nice vases on the tables. So I built the vases, and then I could delete all the tables and copy all the tables with the vases. I copied all the vases instead, and then I decided to make a tablecloth. And then I grouped the scenery with the vases and the tablecloth, and then built all the tables anew. All these steps that are superfluous you actually cannot see because I cut them out, but I really need to practice thinking about optimization of my workflow. I use this Viking fence here because it has a great rustic feel, and I think it fits this restaurant quite nicely, even though it looks a little bit too Viking for my taste, but I think it does the trick. Using one of these stone guests is actually quite a good thing for scaling, because I noticed the scaling of my fence was a bit wonky. I think Frontier in this case is genius. They actually created something that is quite fitting for the mythology theme with the Medusa and all the stone guests, but on the other hand they gave us a good measurement tool for scale, as the stone guests actually work well for gauging scale of your builds. This is genius. I often criticize the game, but in points like this you actually see how genius Frontier can be, because to get the thought of having stone guests for scaling things and still being on theme for one of the big themes of the game is a stroke of genius and quite great. I built some tarpaulin here to guard the guests from rain if they're sitting there, but there will be also some of the tables that are directly exposed to sunlight and rain. Of course, nobody will sit there and the tablecloths would get removed if it's raining, but I think some people prefer to sit in the sun, especially in the autumn or fall or spring months, where it isn't that warm and having the sun shine onto your skin is actually quite a nice sensation. I used these poles here with the ropes to actually have a great tied up look of these canopies, and then turned them around to actually not have the rope on the lower side of the poles, and then copied them around. I really love these canopies because they're actually quite well looking, and even though I asked myself all the time if they are too low or too high, they actually fit quite nicely in the end. But yes, building this more elaborate build actually showed me how much I still enjoy the game, even though it has its flaws. But building such a beautiful thing and actually watching it come together is quite a pleasure. I wanted to have a little bit more contrast and a little bit more of believability in the statics of the house, so I tried to build some trim or columns here to actually keep the house upright. Later in part 2 I do much more stability work. And now it's time for planters, and even more planters. I tried to deviate from the style of the rest of the park some more, because I really want to make the story clear that this restaurant wasn't part of the park first, or vice versa, the park didn't exist before the restaurant was built. So I had to build new planters and couldn't just use the standard planters I used in the rest of my park. I used some of the planters as they are to have some nice round trimmed bushes, and then build some new planters myself. I think compared to the rest of the park, the staff of this restaurant actually is quite diligent in cutting the flowers, grooming the bushes, and keeping everything in order. Here I started building a vase for myself, and I dipped my toes into something the pro builders always do, using parts as they are not meant to be used. I made the vase out of a small piece of support and then created the earth in the vase with a comma from a font. Then I used the plants scaled down. And now you see why Planet Coaster sometimes feels that it isn't as smooth and intuitive as other games. For the life of me, I couldn't select all of the vase and plant. It wasn't possible. Even when removing the plant, actually selecting everything was almost impossible. And then I did what I told you before. I copied all the planters or all the vases over to each table. And then I decided to make a tablecloth out of the cloth pieces and out of the resort wall decoration. So the tables actually have a nice white tablecloth. And then I had to do all of it over again. This shows how much more practice I need and how much more I need to think about the actual building steps I want to do before I just do them and then have to backpedal 3 steps before copying stuff and building everything over again. In the end though, I am really happy with how the tables turned out. I wanted to make the restaurant a little bit more upper class than the QSR at the beginning of my park, and I tried to reach that goal with some nice table clothing, some nice vases, because we don't actually have restaurant seating in the game at the moment. And then I tried to solve another problem, because it wouldn't fit into a restaurant to actually have many garbage bins around there, because in a normal restaurant the garbage from your table or the rest of your dinner would actually get picked up by the servers and then removed and thrown away in the kitchen. But I still needed some garbage bins for the engine to have people not let their garbage lay around on the floor. So I just sunk some of them into planters, and now we have garbage bins without it looking like garbage bins. I will finagle around which planters will be where and where they actually look good, but in the end there will be many different planters and many different decorations on this deck. And now at almost 25 minutes in, we are at the end of the first part of this build. I will leave you with a few impressions of the deck of the restaurant, as there won't be many changes anymore there. And if you like this video, And if you were entertained by it, please like, subscribe, and if you actually got through to the end, comment something like banana bread. This will be an insider, so nobody else will know what you mean by this. But yeah, I want to see many banana breads in the comment. So I say what I always say, have a good day, night, evening, or whenever you watch this video, and stay creative and stay fluffy. Bye bye.